Over the course of the series, you have heard me reference the Works Progress Administration, and typically the word revival that has sometimes been referenced alongside it. The Works Progress Administration helped New Mexico during one of the country's biggest economic hardships, but what did it do for art? How did this program ensure the future conservation of some of New Mexico's most recognizable art styles? The Works Progress Administration program was created in 1933 by President Franklin Roosevelt as a response to the Great Depression. As part of the New Deal, the WPA was essential in providing employment to people who in turn worked on public projects throughout the country, including constructing highways, building schools, and working on public works of art. At its peak, over 10,000 artists were employed throughout the country, with New Mexico being one of the WPA's most active states. By the time the program reached its second year, more than half of New Mexico's population had some form of involvement with the WPA. The Federal Art Project, which oversaw the art component of the WPA, worked with artists throughout the country. Those artists and craftsmen were tasked to create quality pieces of furniture and art or teach others these skills. In total, 29 communities within the state had artists creating works. What set New Mexican artists apart was where they drew their inspiration. Many of the works were influenced by the Spanish colonial era, creating a revival period for several styles of art. Examples of this included furniture, embroidery, and folk art. Additionally, the WPA sponsored and supported many Native American arts. While this program allowed for Hispanic and Native American artists to showcase their skills and produce exceptional creations, they received little to no recognition at that time, and it was not uncommon for these tradesmen to not sign their work. Made of sturdy and quality wood, having carved details, and using various stains were all characteristics of New Mexican WPA-era furniture. Prior to the Great Depression, colonial-style furniture was popular in the tourist market. Because of this interest, vocational programs were created to teach this skill. Experienced carpenters taught people not only how to make quality furniture, but also how to incorporate details like cockle shells and step patterns to decorate these pieces. The Spanish colonial furniture bulletin was used in these vocational schools. Nicknamed blue books because of their blue covers, these books contained images and information on Spanish colonial, Spanish, and Mexican-style furniture. These ensured that the furniture produced by carpenters remained authentic to the original designs. So these pieces were used on a day-to-day basis. Many do not exist today. However, some can be found in museums and private collections. The chest in the photo, which dates to the 1930s, was made in New Mexico. If you look at the front of the chest, you will see a diamond pattern, which was typical during the WPA era. The chest was purchased from a shop in Albuquerque by Mr. Taylor using his and the late Mary Daniels Taylor wedding money. It is currently displayed in the small saguan. The popular needlework style known as Colcha embroidery was first introduced to New Mexico after the arrival of the Spanish. Colcha, which translates to bed cover, was popular between the 17 and 1800s. The style of needlework was first used to mend holes and tears on bed covers, but eventually evolved to an art form that was used to decorate cloth. Each thread was meticulously spun and made of wool from the churro sheep. Colored threads were created using local natural pigments, imported dyes like indigo and cochineal, crushed bugs that create a red dye. Using these threads, the needlework was done on savanilla, a piece of loosely woven wool fabric, and motifs like birds and flowers were common designs. The stitch itself is known as a self-couching stitch, meaning the threads are laid across the front surface of the savanilla and then additional stitches are added to secure that thread. Rather than having a full mirrored image of the design on the back of the savanilla, only part of the stitch is visible, resulting in less thread being used. Other textiles like altar cloths and runners were also made using the stitch. However, with industrialization, Colcha embroidery nearly became obsolete, as manufactured textiles were created in larger quantities and with a faster production time. The founding of the Spanish market in the 1920s brought Colcha embroidery back to life. As there were only a few who still remembered how to do this art, they were encouraged to create their works and display them at the market. Like other New Mexican art, the tourist market embraced Colcha embroidery. Unfortunately, with the passing of its founders and the Great Depression, the market disbanded and Colcha embroidery went with it. Eventually, a second revival came with the WPA. Estela Garcia began teaching Colcha embroidery in Melrose, New Mexico at the Fine Arts Center. There, she taught women Colcha embroidery. Their works were found in government buildings throughout the state as curtains and seat cushions. Due to the beauty of this work, Colcha embroidery was selected to be part of the National New Deal art exhibits where people across the nation could admire this traditional New Mexican art form. While Garcia is remembered for her work, the name of her students were never documented. Colcha saw a third revival in the 1970s, and with the reestablishment of the Spanish market, Colcha embroidery has been active ever since. The curtain in the photo was gifted to Mr. Taylor by his cousin, Fabiola Cabeza de Vaca Gilbert. While the creation date is unknown, this curtain is a great example of how Colcha embroidery looks. Tinsmiths during the WPA were given the opportunity to teach others their trade. One of those tinsmiths was Francisco Delgado, the artist of the mirror in the photo. As mentioned in episode 22, tin was not always accessible in New Mexico, and unlike the decline Colcha embroidery faced with the introduction of industrialization, tin art flourished. Tin art began to fade in popularity after 1915, but during the WPA, a revival in tin art occurred. Turnip plates, which were rolls of tin, were made accessible to these tinsmiths. Using tools like nails, hammers, and punching tools, tinsmiths were able to create decorative pieces in all shapes and sizes. Drawing inspiration from Spanish colonial aesthetics, tinsmiths incorporated these designs to their works. For Delgado, he was able to teach others this skill, and in turn, the works produced were used as decorative accessories in buildings. The Albuquerque Little Theater, for example, has Delgado-made light fixtures. The Works Progress Administration not only helped New Mexicans during the Great Depression, but it also allowed for art to survive. The program allowed for the artistry and vocational skills to be taught and passed down generation to generation. Additional revival phases of these arts brought renewed interest to these creations, and with the reintroduction of the Spanish market, these artists who create furniture, Colcha embroidery, and tin works are finally able to get their credit and recognition for keeping part of New Mexico's cultural identity alive and thriving. To learn more about certain objects in the collection and their ties to the WPA, see Episode 7, WPA Chairs, Episode 20, Straw Art, and Episode 22, New Mexico and Tin.